So yesterday the day was easy. I mean, yesterday every stock was trending down. So we had such a big list of gappers yesterday. That's kind of the way the market works. You get all the hot shreds on one day, and the next day there's nothing. All these gave us a sick range yesterday, but today, we're left with duds like YRD. TSN looks all right. Look, so something like a TSN, like you can see how it's kind of breaking down this trend line, all this kind of funny stuff here. But it just doesn't have that much range, right? Like if this thing has already got earnings and this is all it can move around, that's not really my cup of tea, right? It's not something I like to trade, because I like stuff like light yesterday. The reason it's got such a big range is, well, number one, the breakdown on the daily. Number two, with the float so low on this, you can have a $6 or $7 range. That's kind of what you need to trade, right? To actually have that real hot juice. So, this TSN is going to be kind of like a grandpa stock, I think. Home Depot too, right? Who wants to trade this shit? So Home Depot, yeah, it's got earnings out. It's already faded off its gap. So, you may see some downside into this, but it's a thick stock. You're going to have a billion share float. So you'll just have to be mindful. Its range is starting to show up a little bit. I would have not traded Home Depot if it was gapping up, because it would have been mid-range. But the fact that it's getting actually smoked, if it goes red here, that actually perks my pick a lot better, because it's easy to short high flow stocks, but to buy them, it never works. You just need too much buying pressure. But when you're shorting, the absence of buyers, right, can create flushes. And so you don't necessarily need huge volume to get that thing going. So just something to kind of be mindful of. This AAP is looking pretty good here. You're kind of busting out the highs. The one thing I will say with something like an AAP that's busting out the highs, we're starting to see this. The market's been so ganar that, you're starting to see a lot of these earnings breakouts just fade right the fuck off, right? Because the market's getting smoked. So that's where, you've got to be just real careful. It's dangerous on the long side right now. So obviously, if we're looking at the general market, we're gapping up a little bit here. Thank God we're at least fading back a little, because you just don't want a huge gap up, because it takes up all the range, especially in bear market type of trading. You don't want big gaps up, because then you have to chase the market, and then you're sitting there thinking all day, am I chasing this or not chasing this? Am I chasing this or not chasing this? And it's never, right? It's never as good as you think. So it fading back is probably good. The range that we'll need to watch is if we take out this 168.25 intraday, that was kind of where the pop was end of day on the QQQs, and that's where we hit pre-market. If we come and bust through that, I think, we'll have some possibly some upside to it. If we don't, we'll have to watch, right? We'll have to watch yesterday's kind of support, these lows. If we break under, then we may have another downside. Now, what's the caveat of yesterday was the gimme day, right? Yesterday was the day to make money. It was an obvious day because you had a bunch of setups. But now the market's come down 3 days in a row, right? So when the market is down 3 days in a row, a day 4 becomes much harder, right? If you want to short. But you're not necessarily seeing enough strength to long, right? So it's one of those things where it's too late to short, maybe, right? But it might be not strong enough to long. So we'll have to watch this range and then go from there, right? So that's kind of how I'm going to be playing this. If we come back to the bottom of the range and bust loose, all hell breaks loose, okay, right? If we bust out, then we'll start aggressively getting long. On a day 3, so the market's fallen a lot the last few days. One thing to just kind of be mindful of is, the sneaky Donald. Usually when the market gets a little bit bad, he'll start tweeting
I got dinner. I got dinner with the president of China. He's a fantastic person. We're going to be building walls. We're going to be doing all sorts of stuff. Right now, we're eating a little bit of dim sum, a little bit of green tea, and we're making friends. Okay, we're going to make friends, and then the market will start to ramp. And so you'll have to be just you'll have to be just careful of that. I had that happen to me. It was one of these days around here, like I was long, 1,000 shares of TVIX, and he tweeted like, got a meeting with China. It's set up. Okay, it's gonna be a fantastic dinner party. And that fucking TVIX dropped like $2. I mean, thank God I had a stop loss on it. But right, imagine if you're like going to the bathroom or something, and the Donald says something like that, and you don't got a stop loss on. So just something to be mindful of. Hey, watch this EB today, too. I put this on the list for potential short. This kind of reminds me of like when Sonos, you guys remember when Sono had its like first earnings out? Like it had been, it had been open for like a month and it warned on its earnings and it just got smoked out. All right, this EB might have a very, very similar pattern, right? Like it just opened. I mean, nobody fucking uses Eventbrite anyways, right? Like, let's be honest, right? So, it's like buying Crocs. You just can't do it. So, this one could have a little short in it. It's already moving pre-market. I'd watch this one for an ORB or I'd watch it for an ORB or a quick pullback buy, right? If it pushes down, watch it around the 9 and then, let it roll over. A lot of these stocks are doing that a lot. One thing to remember is like, the classic kind of setup that's happening when these stocks are really getting smoked is like they'll bust down at the open. Remember like midday, watch around that VWAP area. That's where they seem to be fading off. So, in general, we'll keep, we still got Labu on the list in case it breaks down under 45. If the market ramps, and we can actually use this as a bounce, right? Because it's sitting there right on support. This Etsy is probably one of the only strong stocks left. After their earnings, they've had like kind of a nice, easy 2-day pullback on low volume. See how the volume's really light on those? When you get low volume on the pullback, that indicates an absence of heavy selling. And so if the market does bounce, that could be a particular stock that we can use for the bounce side. I'm watching this course for a breakdown here under this 47.75. Don't chase it near lows, though. I've noticed this thing kind of spikes up when you do that. And then we'll use these gappers. So it's a little bit light. One thing to remember is like after yesterday, watch these things. You may see green to red moves on these lights, this PCG and Bazoon. These were the 3 main plays from yesterday. They're all kind of gapping up slightly. So I'd watch those for kind of red rolls. You are seeing like some pre-market action in Huya. A couple people have been asking about this. What do you guys... but man, this thing's just going to gap right into resistance. And after the earnings of Bazoon yesterday, like, can you trust Huya, right? So like Huya's gapping up 8% on earnings. Awesome. But like we saw what happened to Bazoon, right? It's Chinese friend yesterday. I mean, this thing, right, got just smoked on earnings. And so I'm kind of thinking this thing does fade off at the gap. It's just not most likely going to hold. This is the wrong market to buy a Chinese stock on strength because obviously every single Chinese stock is just getting smoked out, right? Like most Chinese stocks are in a big, big downtrend. Look at Baidu, right? These are like the leaders. Big downtrend, big rollover patterns. So I would definitely I don't trust any gaps on these Chinese names for quite some time. They've got a lot of time to repair their charts. Charts can be repaired in a couple different ways with really, really good news. And then most of all, just for time, right? So a little bit light today, but, keep tight on it. This GLBS, if you like small caps, this one is busting up on earnings. I'd start to see if it kind of comes out of this range. Watch this thing. I would not chase this necessarily on an ORB at the open. Something that's going to be up this much. You may need to let it kind of do it on like a 5-minute chart rather than just trying to, bust it loose on a 1 minute because it's going to move super volatile and it's easy to get shaken out. I noticed that like the more volatile the stock is, the longer the time frame is that I got to kind of hold on. I've got to trade it on because Otherwise, I get shakeouts, and you know your stop is in the wrong spot, and you know how all that fun stuff goes. Anybody watching anything fun today? What do we got? VKTX. You know, I'm actually leaning towards VKTX fading this gap because, I mean, the actual pre-market already sucks, but you can kind of see like on its daily chart. It's just stuck under all this resistance. You know, if it had gapped and kind of held over this 15, I think it would have had a lot more juice. But like it being stuck under all that resistance, for me, like if I want to trade a breakout, right, then it needs to break out over, right, resistance levels on its daily chart. Only then, right, are we able to, you know, take it for a long. So like VKTX, like if say it's gaps up to here, right? And you see an ORB in this area, hypothetically. Well, if you see an ORB in this area and say it pops up 40, 50 cents, it's just going to run into this next level of resistance, right? So it's just not clean. And if it's not clean and it's not crisp like that, then you're going to run into levels of supply where they can fade off. Now, it doesn't mean that it can't. You know, you may see right off the bat, you know, at the open, this thing might just get pumped, right? And just bust right through 15s, and then you can hit the dips and the, you know, all the little stuff that it does. Yeah, I did see that, you know, some of the shippers are kind of moving around. So, you know, you could probably add these if you're into the pennies. You know, you can definitely add a couple of these. For me, I usually kind of think, you know, if I'm longing, I just go with whichever shipper is causing the news. So for me, like if GLBS is the one that's causing the move, then you know, I usually will stick with the name brand first because that's where the volume will be. Once it goes nuts, then I start looking at the sympathy of the secondary plays, right? So only once it goes nuts and I've played it and shredded it, made some money, then I start moving to the secondary ones to get what I need to do. So that's always how you want to kind of do sympathies. In your TC2000, right, you can type in any sector you want. So like if you want to do shipping, they'll bring you up a list of every single shipper. You know, if you wanted to do, right, gold, you know, you can come in and it'll bring you every single gold stock. You know, and so that's the best thing about kind of TC2000s. Like you can bring up lists of stocks really quickly to find sympathy plays, which is something, you know, we do quite often. All right, well, it's going to be a little bit slim pickings. I kind of keep an eye on these gappers over here. Those are going to be my phase. And then, you know, we'll do what we have to do. All right? So, my friends, as always, let's go and shred. What kind of music we listening to today? What do you think, Johnny? Maybe, I mean, let's, you know, maybe we just stick with the 80s music. We could really kind of pump ourselves up a little. All right, let's go do what we do, people. As always, hasta mañana, hasta luego.